So Jane, when people are organising get-togethers which involve preparing food for large numbers, it can be a bit daunting for some. Have you got any health and safety tips to help this kind of event run smoothly?
Yes, I would say that planning ahead is perhaps the key message to get over to people. If you're going to be cooking for large groups and you've got lots of work to do, you might be able to prepare some of the food in advance. Either keeping it chilled in the fridge or freezing it, or it just might be that you've got to be really organised and think about how you're going to plan the day of cooking and serving. There are three key areas I think we could perhaps discuss. The preparation that's involved and thinking about that, and then getting on to cooking and then safe practices there. And finally, how you serve food safely is really important.
Okay, great. So getting into a bit more detail, can you tell us a bit more about the preparation side of things?
Yes. Key message is to wash your hands regularly with soap and running warm water, and have some, paper cloth to dry your hands on. But yeah, washing your hands regularly is really important. And then checking that wherever you're doing your food preparation, all the areas are cleaned down well. You can sanitize them with, it can be a commercial, sanitizer product that you can buy in a supermarket, but spraying down before and after you use the area and you use the equipment. And hot soapy water, is the best way to clean as you go. If anybody says they've had symptoms of food poisoning, anybody who's sort of helping you in the kitchen, politely say to them, sorry, but you can't get involved in preparing or serving the food for at least 48 hours. That's a regulation in law about food handling. You want to keep pets away from areas if the food is being prepared there. And it's a good tip to always wash fresh fruit and veg. You don't know what might be on it. It could be soil, it could be chemicals. So it's a good tip to always wash fresh fruit and veg. But you don't wash raw meat. Things like chicken or, a joint of beef or something like that. Because if you wash it, it's likely that there's going to be some sort of splash coming up from the tap, touching the meat, and then that can spread the bacteria onto the surfaces, onto the tap, onto the sink, onto the surrounding areas. So, yeah, not washing meat is really important. Keep raw and ready-to-eat foods separate in the fridge, or if once they're out for preparation. And never use food that's past its use-by date. The use-by date is on perishable foods. It's not the sell-by date or the best before date, but one that says use-by. You really must abide by that. Have a thermometer in your fridge. Check it's working between 0 and 5 degrees Celsius, and then you'll know that that's the optimum temperature for keeping your food chilled. And when you take food out of the fridge, keep it out for the shortest time possible. Put it back, as soon as you've finished doing whatever it is, and take it out just before you're going to work with it. So they're the key sort of preparation tips that I would recommend to you.
So, getting now into a bit more detail about the cooking side of things, can you tell us a bit more about making sure all of those practices are safe as well?
Okay, as far as cooking goes then, always read your cooking instructions. That's the starting point. And make sure you properly cook the food before you serve it. Either look at the instructions on the packet or look at your recipe, and that'll give you an indication of how long something takes to cook. There are some foods that you've got to be really careful with, so things like poultry, chicken. If you've got a piece of meat that's been rolled and tied, that's a piece of meat that's needs really thorough cooking. Things like stews and casseroles, anything made with minced meats, and any meat products, you've got to cook those really thoroughly. And there is a key temperature for that, making sure that the centre of that piece of meat or that dish reaches 75 degrees Celsius or above. You might have a food probe which you can put into the centre of the food to check that. The other way, you might know it's cooked, it's got to be piping hot, too hot to be able to eat. You could put a skewer in, draw it out, and then touch it onto your hands. And if it's really scalding hot, then that should be fine. But, if you're going to be cooking meat, a food thermometer would be a really good purchase. And the key, even if you've got people waiting for food and you're feeling a bit pressured about it, don't reduce the cooking times. Typical might be on something like a barbecue, and you've got a great queue of people waiting for their burger. Don't run the risk of just flashing them onto the coals and thinking that they'll do. They've really got to be cooked thoroughly. People would rather wait for food well cooked than run the risk of food poisoning.
Absolutely. Yeah, thank you. And finally, so now that your food is ready to be eaten, are there any tips you have about that's the serving side of things, and any things to bear in mind for that final stage?
Yeah, there's key time targets with how long you keep food out on display or you're serving it. So we said right at the beginning, keep food in the fridge as long as possible. But once it comes out, it should only be out and displayed and being served for up to 2 hours. And after that, you would have to throw it away. Seems very wasteful, but the longer the food sits out at room temperature, there is a chance that bacteria can grow in the food. If you've got, say, a hot buffet, let's think, could be that you're serving lasagna and salads. So you've got your lasagna and you want it really nice and hot. The best thing to do would be to keep it in a hot holding piece of equipment, but you might not have that. So if you haven't got that option of holding the food at a key temperature, which is 63 degrees Celsius or above, then you can just have it out at room temperature, but then you've got that 2 hour limit as well to get it served and for it to be eaten. So keep food chilled as long as possible if it needs chilling. Keep it at the right temperature. And if food is out for a long period of time, longer than 2 hours, then you do have to throw it away.
Okay, great. Thanks very much, Jane. There's lots to consider there, but it's all with the right preparation and planning. It's all very manageable, isn't it, to make sure that those events can go ahead safely.
Yes, and we've got the detail in attached resources with this, and you can also go to the Food Standards Agency website to find more information.